All right. Hi, guys. Today we're going to be talking about disturbance and succession. So generally speaking, a disturbance is any environmental change that affects the biological makeup of an ecosystem. The severity of a disturbance is largely a function of its intensity, its duration, and its geographic spread. This basically means that a disturbance can be anything as minor as a tree falling down to a major volcanic eruption, and these are both considered disturbances. The severity of a disturbance has a large impact on whether the succession following it is primary or secondary. Now, what is succession? Succession is the process by which the species diversity in an ecosystem changes, particularly following a disturbance event. When the soil is removed or transplanted, we consider this primary succession, and when the soil is left intact, we consider this secondary succession. Some examples of primary succession include major flooding, volcanic eruptions, or um, yeah. Some examples of secondary succession include logging and wildfires. So, secondary succession often occurs much more quickly than primary succession because in the soil you often find bacteria, decomposing organic matter, germinated seeds, not yet germinated seeds, all of which contribute to the recovery of an ecosystem following a disturbance event. Here we have the 1988 Yellowstone fire, was a disturbance event which resulted in secondary succession. After just 1 year, you can start to see some grasses growing there. Primary succession events involve, normal geological processes forming earth and forming soil, which can often take a long, long, long time indeed. Now, we're going to go into the stages of succession. I just want to clarify that because we're talking about ecology here, everything is highly dependent on the circumstances, and it's very complicated. So we're just going to be talking very generally, all right? Within the first year, you end up with something that was known as a pioneer species. These pioneer species are very interesting because they often have some very important traits in common. In particular, you have nitrogen fixation, which is when diatomic nitrogen in the atmosphere is converted to NH3. As we've already seen, nitrogen is crucial to to all life forms on Earth. So, but most life forms don't have the ability to fix nitrogen, so they can't just get nitrogen from the atmosphere. We need some forms of organisms like this blue-green algae here to fix the nitrogen so that future species can take advantage of this. So the thing about succession is that the soil is often of a very poor quality, and the importance of pioneer species is making the soil be of a better quality so that more complex organisms can come result can colonize it. I'm sorry. Here we have something known as fireweed because it comes after fires, obviously. It demonstrates another important trait of pioneer species, namely that they're extremely versatile. Fireweed can survive under a wide variety of pH levels, dryness, etc., 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 and it can spread its seeds for a long, long, long time. So it's very good at taking advantage of pollinators. Um, Within 2 to 5 years, you end up with these perennial grasses and weeds. Um, these plants don't no longer have so much ability to fix nitrogen, but they're also relatively short-lived, and um, they're also sometimes considered pioneer species. For example, birch trees are a form of pioneer. They're actually pioneer species that you find after fires. They grow very, very quickly. They grow in about 2 years. You have a mature birch tree, and they can actually be very dangerous because they're so good at they're such good competitors that they can suck up the nutrients. Within 5 to 10 years, you end up with shrubs such as this nettle here, and after 10 to 75 years, you start to see some trees like the sycamore tree. These all of these examples here are examples of succession occurring in an abandoned car park, actually, within about a decade. But uh, you don't see the final stage, which is known as the climax community, until you've given it about a century. This is a climax community in Alaska following 350 years after glacier ended up there. And a climax community is where you have a sort of ecological equilibrium. So there's no drastic changes in the rate of growing of species. It's not really changing too much. There's a little bit of controversy here because um, climax communities don't seem to be as stable as we used to think they were. And the Earth is a dynamic ecosystem. So but in the short term, and when I'm talking about the short term in geological terms, it can be up to millennia. But in the short term, climax community is an important term to keep in mind. Now we're going to be talking about what the College Board actually wants you to know. This are the effects of a change in the community's population in the community, effects of a change of matter or energy availability on communities. Both of these are fairly obvious when you're talking about succession. Now, community populations and matter or energy availability are necessarily linked because when you have a drastic lowering of a sort of a species in an area, you also tend to lower the biomass drastically. And when you lower the biomass, a lot of species that subsisted on, for example, the plant life there, for example, herbivores, they can no longer live there, and they either die out or they have to move or something else. So something else that's interesting is that in some cases, a change in community population can actually be an example of disturbance. For example, a keystone species such as this is a very bad a sea star, it eats a lot of the mollusks. If it is wiped out, the mollusks will overrun reefs and shallow tidewater and effectively outcompeting any other organism there, resulting in a major disturbance. We can also talk about the consequences of human actions on both local and global ecosystems. Uh, these can be fairly obvious. We all know that climate change, or I hope that we all know that climate change is primarily a cause of human action, and it can result in an increase in wildfires and an increase in hurricanes, both of which are disturbance events which can later result in primary or secondary succession. They can also be fairly counterintuitive. For example, fire extinguishing, which is often considered a good thing for the well-being of a community, has actually resulted in a drastic lowering in wildfires in the sequoia forest. Now, some of you might say, time fires. Some of you might think this is a good thing. However, when you are burning, when you're burning a small fire, you don't end up with as much destruction as you do when you burn a large fire. And the more time there is between forest fires, the more fuel there is to burn and the more drastic and severe that the fire is. So some ecologists have actually started to set off some controlled fires in redwood forests in order to maintain the climax community that has been there for hundreds upon hundreds of years. So that's all for today. Thank you, and I hope you learned something.